8. Nicholas Foreman. We've all experienced jealousy at some point in our lives. Whether it was seeing someone with a better job, cooler car, more money, or prettier face, it's a universal experience to have longed for something else. But most of us don't take any action over these feelings. They come and go, and we move on with life. Not everyone is capable of forgetting, though. Some become so enraged over jealousy that they do the unthinkable. Just like a young man named Nicholas Foreman. 23-year-old Nicholas and his girlfriend Sabrina Haruni were in an Uber ride when they got into a heated argument. At some point during the drive, Sabrina had received a text. Nicholas was enraged over the message, and his jealousy soon turned to violence. By the time they reached his house, he was abusing Sabrina both verbally and physically. The next morning, Nicholas brought her to the hospital, covered in bruises and obvious signs of distress. What he didn't know was that Sabrina was already dead. It's even more shocking to find out Nick put Sabrina's body in yet another Uber on the way to the hospital. Who knows what that driver was thinking as a random man dragged a corpse into their back seat. Sabrina's family was devastated by the news of her murder. Her sister is quoted saying, "An evil devil person hurt my sister, took her life from us, did not value her." The family didn't even know of Nick's existence until they found out their precious daughter and sister was dead. It takes a special sick kind of person to hurt someone you supposedly love. But then again, if Nick was willing to kill Sabrina over something as fleeting as jealousy, did he really love her in the first place? 7. Girlfriend stabs boyfriend with a barbecue skewer. There's a common stereotype that women can get intensely jealous, and while it's entirely untrue for most, some women can't help but fit the bill. Svetlana Boyarinova was 27 years old when she stabbed her lover, Evgeny Solyanik, in the chest with a massive barbecue skewer during a fight. It took place during a camping trip the couple was on with a few of Evgeny's closest friends. The friends claim Svetlana had always been obsessive and jealous, always accusing Evgeny of cheating on her with other women. They said Evgeny never actually cheated, and he just couldn't ever get rid of his girlfriend despite the constant harassment. He told them, "It's as if she uses black magic to keep us together." The fight at the campsite was over, you guessed it, cheating. After Svetlana stabbed her boyfriend, she immediately seemed to regret her action and pulled the 2-foot, 6-meter skewer out of him, then rushed Evgeny to the hospital. The doctors there looked him over and figured he was fine, so the heated lovers and Evgeny's friends all went back to camping as if nothing was wrong, which seems strange, right? If someone stabbed us, we'd run for the hills. But to each their own. The morning after, Evgeny wasn't feeling well, so they brought him back to see the doctors. Once back in medical care, they determined his heart and lungs had actually been damaged. Just a few short hours later, Evgeny passed away. Meanwhile, his jealous girlfriend was taken into custody and sent to prison for killing him. 6. Boyfriend kills Thai lover. As much as we hate to admit it, sex trafficking and prostitution is rampant all over the world, especially in the Thai city of Pattaya, where our next story takes place. Napathorn Kanakosimsophan was a young woman who made a living entertaining men and foreigners in return for favors and money. She was actually doing fairly well for herself considering the business she was in. One of her many suitors sent her a 700-pound, $960 monthly allowance. That, combined with the other cash she made, allowed her to get a boob job, designer items, a new car, and other plastic surgeries. She was fairly well known in the red light district community. She had the nickname Nurse from many of her admirers, likely because she was able to nurse men back to health with her charm and seduction. Everything was going well until one of the nurse's boyfriends found out about his competition. His name was Wallop Waihongtong, and he had been dating Napathorn for over a year when he discovered her nightlife. After confronting her over the other men, Wallop shot his lover in the head 6 times while she sat in her car. In the police investigation, they found that Wallop contacted Napathorn, saying that he would stop talking to her if she agreed to meet up with him. Little did she know it'd be her last meeting with a man. Wallop was later labeled as the killer when his car was filmed near the scene of the crime by CCTV camera footage. What would you do if you found out your partner was seeing other people? Hopefully nothing as extreme as what we've seen so far, but tell us your thoughts down below. If you've enjoyed this video so far, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to see future videos. 5. Poppy Dave Joe Atkinson. When you're in a relationship, the last thing you'd want is your significant other to get hurt. But once you break up, things start to change. Those deep feelings of love can quickly turn into even greater anger or sadness. And in the case of Joe Atkinson, jealousy. Joe had just recently broken up with his girlfriend, Poppy Devi Waterhouse, but he still shared an apartment with her. Poppy had quickly moved on from Joe, finding another man to love soon after the separation. Perhaps Joe was upset over this fact. How could she move on already when he was still hurt? Or maybe it was another reason altogether. Poppy had often been described as a genius in her life. She graduated with a degree in math and worked for a well-known mathematician and astronomer named William Hill. She was gifted, that's for sure, and maybe Joe didn't like that. She was happy in a new relationship with a great job and a bright future ahead of her, and Joe had nothing. One night at the apartment, the 2 young adults got into an argument. During the fight, Joe grabbed a knife from the kitchen and brutally stabbed his ex. Forensic determined that Poppy had been stabbed over 70 times, and in total she had more than 100 injuries on her body. Joe made an attempt to clean up the crime scene and make it look like he had no fault in her death, but justice finds a way, and the cops were much smarter than he was. 4. William Balfour. Many of us have heard of the famous singer and actress Jennifer Hudson, whose fame skyrocketed after winning one of the early seasons of American Idol. But a lot of people haven't heard of Hudson's former brother-in-law, William Balfour. In case you didn't know, William is a convicted killer who took the lives of 3 innocent people. He was once married to Jennifer Hudson's sister, Julia Hudson. Julia had just finished celebrating her birthday at her family's home, and the day after was confronted by her husband. He was furious at her and in a heated rage. He claimed that she was cheating on him with another man. Why, you might ask? Because he saw a birthday present in the house and for some reason believed it was from a lover. She denied his accusations and left the house. But Will was still angry. He left the building for a brief moment, then returned to take out his frustrations. Inside the home, he shot cold blank his wife's mother while she was sitting in the living room. Will then went on to find his brother-in-law sleeping peacefully, only to kill him too. His stepson was also in the house, obviously scared at this point. Balfour coaxed the 7-year-old child into his in-laws' car. It's believed that moments later he shot his own stepson with a bullet to the head. After wrapping the kid's body in a shower curtain, Will left the body sitting in the car for days until it was discovered. After a long court prosecution, William was given 3 life sentences, 1 for each of his victims. Even if he does get jealous in prison, there's no more hope left for Will. And honestly, he deserves it. 3. Burnt alive. 2 young girls were given long prison sentences for the murder of an 18-year-old named Boitumelo Diamini. According to reports from the police, Cynthia Mosupi and Sharon Twala became jealous of Diamini's relationship and close connection with a boy. But instead of bad-mouthing or name-calling like most petty disagreements, these 2 went with the extreme option. Fueled by jealous rage, the pair kidnapped Diamini from the Aletsa Secondary School. The interaction was recorded on one of the school's security cameras. In the video, you can see the two women approach a frightened Diamini who begs them to let her go, saying she'll stay away from the man. But her pleas were in vain. Mosupi poured gasoline all over Diamini's body. They then took their victim to a nearby cemetery where they dragged her out of a car and beat her up. In court records, they also claim that they tried to tie the young girl to a tree but failed. Later on, Diamini was set on fire and burned alive. It's devastating to think what Diamini's last scared thoughts were and how much pain they put her through all over some guy. With further investigation, authorities determined Mosupi and Twala were under the effects of alcohol and drugs when the crime was committed. If they were sober and did this, they'd be even bigger monsters. 2. Shoes. Some people will do whatever it takes to look good, even if it means taking a life. Tiana Brown was only 15 years old when she stabbed and killed Shannon Braithwaite. Autopsy reports showed that Shannon was cut 49 times. So what motive did Tiana have for such a gruesome act? She wanted Shannon's shoes. Well, to be fair, it was just a bit more complicated than that. While the shoes were one of the motivating factors, Tiana was jealous of Shannon's life in general. It seemed like the girl had everything she didn't. While we in no way want to humanize a murderer, Tiana did have a rough life. She had been sexually abused and raped at an early age, which led her to eventually run away from home. Shannon was actually her cousin, and her aunt had just welcomed Tiana into her home only to be left with a dead daughter. In a psych evaluation after Brown's arrest, they uncovered a shocking truth Tiana had found out before the murder. Her mother was also raped by her grandmother's boyfriend. This indecent act is what led to her birth. So, from the beginning, it seems the world has had it out for Tiana. But even with a tough start, Shannon and her mother loved her and treated her with kindness. After the murder, Tiana took the sneakers off of Shannon's dead body and took some other things from her cousin's room. She then called 911 and told them a fake story about an intruder coming in and overpowering Shannon. And after all of this, after literally killing one of the only people in her life to be truly kind to her, Tiana went out to party with friends. Even with such a horrible background, it's hard to feel sorry for someone who's made such heartless, jealous decisions. 1. Sisters. As we've seen in previous listings, family relationships can sometimes get complicated, even between two sisters. From the outside looking in, Elizaveta Dubravina and her sister Stefania looked super close. But something shifted in their fondness of one another. For years, Elizaveta was jealous of her younger sibling's beauty. She tried her best to look like her, copying her hair and even as closely as following a similar makeup routine. But it was never enough. Stefania just had something she didn't. After turning 17, Stefania started getting offered modeling jobs, which earned her some extra money as well as attention from attractive men. With this newfound success, Elizaveta's jealousy was worse than ever before. One night, the two of them were alone in Stefania's boyfriend's apartment. Elizaveta had taken some drugs earlier in the day and she finally snapped. An argument broke out and she stabbed Stefania hundreds of times all over her body. Eliza also gouged out the young girl's eyes and tried to cut off her ears too. Once she had relieved some of her built-up rage and came to her senses, she tried to flee the scene of the crime, leaving Stefania alive on the floor, bleeding out slowly. The last thing the poor girl saw was her sister, one she thought loved her dearly, committing the ultimate betrayal. When the boyfriend got home, he walked into a nightmare. Luckily, he was just in time. As Eliza was about to make her escape, he caught her. He called the police, who came to the apartment and put Eliza under arrest. Later on in court, video footage shows Eliza stone-faced in court, as if she felt no guilt for what she'd done to her own sister. Her sentence was a measly 13 years for a horrific crime that she'll have to live with forever. The wrong target. On a Wednesday night back in 2015, a 21-year-old man tried to pull off a series of heists. He went to 3 different places to steal cash. At each venue, he pulled out a shotgun and ordered all his victims to get on the ground and give him all the money they had on them. But it was on his last heist where things went seriously wrong. As he tried to flee the scene, he accidentally pulled the trigger of his shotgun and shot himself in the leg. He nearly tore his entire leg off. After all, this is a shotgun and not a pistol. It's not just a single bullet, it's hundreds of pellets that can blow your limbs off. Unfortunately for the criminal, there's nothing in the robbery handbook about what to do once you've shot yourself in the leg. The police eventually tracked him down to an apartment building. He was incredibly easy to identify. The cops saw a man trying to limp away from them on his profusely bleeding leg. It was obviously the limping man who had done the robberies. When the police emptied his pockets, they found all the cash they had earned on his night of stealing, though it wasn't very much. You don't get a big store from a nail salon and a fast food joint. In the end, the cops took him to a hospital where he had to be guarded by an officer while waiting to be discharged. Not only did he fail to get away with any crime, he also left himself with a wounded leg and jail time. 9. Drunk and disorderly. In Germany, a 56-year-old man named Daniel Onfray walked into a bank in the town of Mortain. This is a pretty small town, one of those places where everybody knows juicy secrets about their neighbors. It was about breakfast time. Daniel knew that he was in desperate need of the money and he had to act quick. So he started drinking to work up the bravery to rob the bank. By the time he finally worked up enough liquid courage to do the job, he was utterly wasted. He was so wasted that instead of putting on a proper ski mask to do the robbery right, he simply pulled a pair of underpants over his face to disguise himself. In a town where everybody knows everyone, this clearly did not work. Daniel was immediately recognized by several people working at the bank. The female teller actually persuaded him to put away his pocket knife and walk away while she called the police. The authorities arrested Daniel before he got very far and hauled him into jail. At his court hearing, he admitted not only to the bank robbery, but also to stealing a couple bicycles the day before. The judge didn't take any pity on the drunken lunatic and sentenced him to 8 months in prison for attempted robbery with a pocket knife. The judge also ordered him to seek alcohol counseling, which will probably do more good than the jail time. 8. Killing the accomplice. A gunman who was robbing a liquor store in El Sereno, Los Angeles, accidentally shot and killed his partner when the owner of the business put up an unexpected struggle. A life of crime is dangerous, especially when you have a trigger-happy partner. The gunman and his accomplice had gone into the liquor store armed and ready to rock, but they had never expected that the store owner would fight back so insistently. One of the robbers was armed with a rifle. His accomplice was armed with a knife. Somewhere during the fighting, the guy with the rifle pulled the trigger. But instead of blowing away the store owner that was fighting back, he shot his partner. Oops. This wasn't one of those shootings that you walk away from either. The accomplice wound up bleeding to death on the floor of the liquor store, while the other guy turned and ran away. The liquor store owner didn't suffer any injuries at all, but was extremely shaken. In the end, the shooter didn't get far and the police caught up with him. Not only is he now in trouble for robbery, he's also got a charge of manslaughter against him. 7. The Master Burglar. A man in Japan managed to get away with 29 robberies before he was finally arrested. He had a masterful scheme that, while obviously immoral and wrong, was quite frankly brilliant. Mind you, brilliant in a deceitful and scummy kind of way. Here's what he did. The man would get a job at a convenience store. Then on his first day, he robbed the store for all that he could get away with. According to the Japanese police in the Oita prefecture, this individual got away with at least $100,000 in just over a year. He would start a job on a Tuesday, clear out the cash register, steal whatever goods he could, try to get into the safe, and then run away before anyone knew what happened. If he would have just stopped at $100,000, he may have gotten away with the crime too. He ripped off 29 stores across 16 prefectures. What are the Japanese equivalent of states? Police finally arrested him by compiling information from the various store managers around the country. They all detailed the same man with the same MO. Then when the robber went in to interview for his 30th convenience store, the manager interviewing him recognized his picture from the police, called the cops, and he was finally taken in for good. Was this guy a genius who came up with a perfect robbery scheme, or was he just as dumb as every other criminal who's gotten caught? Let us know your thoughts on the first day bandit in the comments, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 6. Thrown into the river. A perfectly innocent musician was killed by brutal gang members in a robbery gone terribly, terribly wrong. The musician's name was Thomas Kennedy, and he was just 28 years old at the time of his murder. He was on holiday in the county of Georgia, the ex-Soviet state, when a group of men invited him out for drinks. Now, it's important to note that if you're in a strange place and strange people invite you to drink alcohol, it's probably not a good idea to go with them. And in this case, it was the last bad idea that Thomas Kennedy would ever have. 3 days after going for a drink with these strange men, Thomas was discovered dead in the river. The Irish national had been murdered. 5 men were arrested for suspicion of committing the crime. But when the group went to court, they were adamant that they did not kill the tourist. They did freely admit that they robbed Thomas, but they said they never killed him. The police said otherwise. They suggested that after the 5 men robbed the Irish tourist, they panicked. They had beaten him so badly that they thought he was dead. To get rid of the evidence, they picked up his body and threw it into the nearest river. But Thomas hadn't been dead. Thomas was still alive when they threw him in the river, meaning that his final moments were spent struggling against the current and not understanding what was happening. It must have been terrifying as Thomas was being pulled downriver to his death. Luckily, all 5 men are looking at 17 years in prison for this terrible crime. 5. The butt dial. A German drug dealer was caught by the police after he fell asleep on top of his phone and accidentally butt-dialed the authorities. He may not have been trying to commit a robbery, but this guy was still one of the dumbest criminals ever and deserves every bit of flack we give him. Because the guy was sleeping, the police couldn't actually hear anything incriminating. They could only hear him snoring and groaning. Still, the police have to check whenever they are called. So in the sleepy town of Voldbro, officers were dispatched. The cops were astonished when they arrived at the young man's home and discovered the stinky smell of cannabis. The guy had so much dope in his house that the police could smell it as soon as they stepped outside their patrol cars. When they entered the home, the guy was still sleeping. He was passed out dead on the sofa, though he did wake up when the police barged in. When the guy checked his phone, he saw that he had accidentally called emergency services not just once, but nearly half a dozen times in his sleep. Others found weed, ecstasy pills, meth, and a whole lot of cash. Enough evidence to put the criminal away for a long time. 4. Running out of gas. While trying to escape from a robbery in Berry Hill, an extremely dumb criminal ran out of gas and was arrested. According to investigator Tony Russo with the Berry Hill Police Department, Richard Ewing walked into a gas station very early on Monday morning with his hands in his pockets. He approached the station attendant, pretended that he had a gun in his pocket, and then showed the clerk a handwritten message demanding cash. Afraid for his life, the clerk handed over everything. He gave cigarettes, cash from the register, and even some scratch-and-win lottery tickets. With his robbery a success, Richard ran to his minivan and drove away. But he really hadn't thought this through. His van had no headlights, making the vehicle exceptionally easy to spot. Plus, the van had no gas in it. Police caught up to the thief, turned on their lights, and then got into a very slow chase. They were going about 30 miles per hour, 48 kilometers per hour. But the chase only lasted 2 minutes before the van pulled over to the side of the road and stopped. It had no more fuel to keep going. When Richard was pulled out of his car, he asked the police why they were trying to jam him up, as if he hadn't done anything wrong. But luckily for the cops, they found all the evidence they needed in his minivan, while the surveillance footage from the gas station clearly showed him robbing it. This guy was not the sharpest tool in the shed, that's for sure. 3. Hungry for chocolate. A man in Florida has been arrested for stealing a chocolate bar at knife point. It happened in Clearwater, with the individual walking into a Largo Wawa gas station with a deadly weapon and walking out with a Snickers bar. According to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, the thief was 49-year-old Eric Minto. Imagine being half a century old and having to resort to armed robbery just to eat a chocolate bar. Either this guy was already crazy or so hungry that he wasn't feeling like himself. When he walked into the store, he first asked the clerk at the counter if he could have some free food. When the clerk said no, that was when Eric pulled out the pocket knife and pointed it at the guy behind the counter. He then told the clerk not to make him do something stupid and to hand over the Snickers bar before things got violent. Naturally, the clerk gave the man the chocolate that he wanted. It's not worth dying over chocolate, caramel, and nougat. By the time the police showed up, Eric had already run away. But they found him not far from the store, filled up on chocolate and acting like nothing had happened. He was arrested and held on a bond of $150,000. 2. Poor linguistics. When Alan Slattery, 67 years old, tried to rob a bank, he failed miserably. Not because his plan was terrible or because he didn't have the gumption that it needed. His robbery was a failure because the staff at the bank couldn't read his handwritten note. When Alan walked into the Nationwide Building Society branch in Eastbourne, the UK, he gave them a piece of paper. But the cashier couldn't read whatever was written on it because of the man's atrocious handwriting. Alan got so flustered by what was happening that he simply stormed out of the bank without taking any money. After Alan had gone, the staff members crowded around the note and worked together to decipher it. Alan had written something along the lines of, "Just hand over the 10s and the 20s. Think about the customers." That was when staff realized he had been trying to rob them. They called the police. They quickly tracked down Alan, and he was linked to a handful of other robberies. He had gone into 2 other banks over the last 14 days and robbed them as well, getting away with something around $3,000, which isn't a lot if you ask us. When the police arrested Alan at his home, they had all the evidence they needed to put him away for 6 years. 1. A deadly promise. An 18-year-old girl from Texas is currently facing capital murder charges after a violent robbery gone horribly wrong. According to Dallas police, Sydney Whitaker directly caused the death of Adrian Wells, who was killed back in May of this year. The cops say that Sydney Whitaker used her youth and good looks to lure Adrian out of his apartment. She promised that she would hook up with him, but instead, 3 of her friends beat the guy to death. When Adrian walked out of his house, probably smiling ear to ear because he thought he was about to get some action, 3 men attacked. They pulled out guns, forced him back into his apartment so they could steal all his stuff, and then they shot him dead. Even though Sydney didn't technically pull any triggers, she is still responsible for his death by participating in the home invasion robbery that left Adrian dead. But what's really bizarre in this case so far is that nobody else has been arrested yet. Last we heard, she hasn't given up any of her accomplices. She's still sitting in the Dallas County Jail on a bail of $500,000.
Number 9. Selling an organ. Who doesn't like to get their hands on the latest smartphones and tech available on the market? But let's be real, it's not exactly easy on your wallet to keep up with all the new tech trends. Every time Apple launches a new product, the internet goes nuts with memes about how expensive the product is. One of the most popular jokes on the internet is the one where you'd have to sell your kidney to afford the new iPhone. Well, a 17-year-old in China wanted one so bad that he decided to do something drastic just to get one. He really did sell one of his kidneys. In 2011, Wang Shenkun sold his kidney on China's black market for $2,500. He found 3 middlemen on a Chinese chatting platform and traveled to southern Henan province, where he was introduced to some sketchy surgeons who removed his kidney in an underground clinic. Not very surprisingly, shortly after the illegal surgery, Wang started to suffer from a decreased level of kidney function. He experienced renal failure in his second kidney after having the one removed. It is said that it was due to the unsanitary conditions where the surgery took place. Shocker. In 2012, 9 individuals connected to the organ harvesting case were arrested for their involvement. Wang, who is now 25, did get the iPhone he wanted, but the health complications from selling his kidney has permanently disabled him, and he is now bedridden. Number 8. Pet my head. The life of a college student isn't easy. Unless you have family money or receive scholarships, paying for school and life in general while attending school is tough. Some people get part-time jobs to solve their money problems, while others find creative solutions. A young man was studying abroad in Sapporo, Japan, when he got an idea to solve his financial debts. Apparently, hair fetishes are a thing, and this guy had pretty amazing curly hair, which is not something one would commonly see in Japan. After he received several comments from his classmates about his fine locks, he thought, hey, maybe I can make some money from this. So he stood outside his college cafeteria with a board that said people could touch his hair for 100 yen. Within an hour, he had earned 500 yen. After that, he came up with another idea. He used the money to buy old Pokemon games from the local shops and sold them to people in the US for about 1,300% markup. Americans love their Pokemon. We don't know what he studied in college, but a business major would have been a damn good idea for him. Number 7. How I got my Xbox. A guy, who will remain anonymous, really wanted the new Xbox, but he couldn't afford it. One day, he was approached by another guy who was in love with a girl. He desperately wanted to be with her. However, there was one big problem. She was already in a relationship. So the admirer told the guy he would pay him if he did him a big favor. The favor? Break into the boyfriend's house and plant incriminating evidence on his computer's hard drive, so the girlfriend would break up with him. Then, the admirer would subsequently swoop in and steal her heart. If it sounds a little dumb, that's because it is. But here's the twist. When the guy broke into the house, he didn't even have to plan anything crazy. The boyfriend already had some pretty sick stuff on his hard drive, so all he had to do was make copies and leave them in conspicuous places for the girlfriend to find. Needless to say, their relationship ended soon after, and the guy was able to buy himself the new gaming console. Number 6. Poop dreams. 33-year-old Alana Castro has always had a weird fascination with human waste. At least, that's what her family says. Now a nursing student in San Gabriel, she has found the perfect side hustle for her childhood obsession. In Castro's words, it's like her poop dreams have come true. It all started with an ad on Instagram for Tustin Medical Lab. The lab had advertised that they were paying for stool samples, and Castro immediately signed up for it. Stool samples may sound like a joke, but Castro makes almost $75 per visit, and she visits the lab several times a week. Doesn't sound so icky anymore, does it? You visit the lab, do your business, and get back to your daily routine. Indigestion can sometimes ruin the visit, but there aren't many downsides to this. What do you think? Would you ever sell your own stool? Have you done it before? Let us know in the comments. And if you're liking the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 5. Faking mom's death. In Pakistan, 36-year-old Abraham Rock found himself in grave financial trouble. Just when he thought there was no way out, he got an idea. He could fake his mother's death and use the insurance money to pay off all his debts. He figured they would have enough to live on for the rest of their lives. We didn't say it was a good idea. Rock looked up insurance policies that gave the highest payouts. Rock even discussed the plan with his uncle. He didn't just want a payout, he wanted the maximum payout possible. For that, it was required that the death had to happen under specific circumstances. A road accident involving public transport was one of them. So, Rock decided to fake his 54-year-old mother's death. As for his mother, she too was in on the plan. On June 29, 2018, the mother and son duo traveled to Islamabad, Pakistan to kickstart their plan. While in Islamabad, Rock's uncle helped him get his hands on forged documents and even got them translated into English for easier claims in Singapore. When he submitted the forged death certificates, police documents, and medical certificates, he was initially granted $95,000 from the insurance agencies. But on further inquiry, the insurance companies found discrepancies in the document and asked him to provide the burial address of his deceased mother. Rock thought he was clever to provide the address to his grandmother's tomb, but the insurance investigators didn't buy it and eventually found his mother alive and well in Pakistan. In November 2018, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison and to return all the money. His mother also had to serve a 15-month sentence. Rock was already drowning in debt, and with the current case proceedings, it looks like he's going to remain in the hole for a long, long time. Number 4. Middle school money. What were you like in middle school? Middle school is the time in our lives when we really are up to no good. There's no worry about college applications or fitting into social circles. As a result of that carefree life, mischief becomes the main source of entertainment. When asked what's the weirdest thing that he had done for money, a Reddit user replied that he snorted crushed up Tic Tacs for $5. Sometime 8 years ago, he was in 6th grade and a few 8th graders came up to him with a challenge. If he could snort all the crushed up Tic Tacs, he would get $5. In the mind of a middle schooler, that's easy money, so he readily agreed. As he was snorting the finely ground candies, one of the 8th graders ran to a teacher and said a kid was doing drugs in school. Can you imagine the horror on the teacher's face when they saw the kid snorting white powder in class? He was immediately dragged to the principal's office. It took him some time to explain the situation to his principal, and finally, after checking the powder, they realized it indeed was just candy. The 8th graders got detention for an entire week for getting the kid into trouble. The kid who snorted the Tic Tacs got away with $5. Number 3. $20 brownies. It's common knowledge that music festivals are lit. Lit, meaning lots of people are on drugs. You don't have to do drugs to enjoy the music, but a lot of people do. Ultra Music Festival is an outdoor electronic music fest, and most people are looking forward to have a good time and often take illicit substances to elevate that experience. One guy thought he would bank on this concept, and bank he did. This man turned a music festival into his playground and showed what ambiguous marketing can do. The idea was simple. The investment was low and the returns were phenomenal. Is there anything better than this? He came up with a genius idea to sell brownies. He was selling them for $20 a pop, so naturally, people thought they were special, but they weren't. They were just normal brownies he bought at the grocery store. Just plain old delicious brownies. He never specified that the brownies had anything other than the normal ingredients in them. People just assumed they did. The festival goers thought they were getting hash brownies for $20. They must have been really disappointed when the high didn't kick in. Number 2. Goldsmith duties. The job of a goldsmith isn't just about making dainty pieces of jewelry. Sometimes the job can be downright gruesome, especially when it comes to extracting gold. But hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. A Reddit user and goldsmith revealed that he once had to hammer the gold out of a dead man's tooth. If the image of a grave robber comes to mind, don't worry, he was a legitimate goldsmith, or so he claims. A client asked him to make some jewelry with the gold his family owned. Now, he had no clue when he accepted the offer that the client's family gold was embedded in the grandfather's teeth. The grandpa had passed and left his gold teeth behind. To extract the precious metal, the goldsmith had to crush the teeth to get to the shiny stuff. He says that even though he was nowhere near the actual dead body, the smell of death was incredibly strong. After all that hard work, he told the client that the gold from the teeth wasn't really the kind of gold that's great to make jewelry, but he made it anyway. After this incident, he also shared that the client had also asked him to make jewelry out of the teeth of someone's dead horse. Needless to say, he declined the offer. And number 1, scientific studies. A little side hustle never hurt anyone, right? Wrong. In this case, a simple side hustle ruined thousands of scientific studies. TikToker Sarah Frank from Florida thought making a video on easy side hustles for teens would help her get more views and followers. She was right. The video titled Side Hustles Part 1 raked in over 4 million views, but the repercussions were not so positive. In the video, she told her viewers how they could make easy money sitting at home using sites that pay for microtasks. Frank shared how she made money using a site called Prolific that paid people for taking surveys. Scientists and researchers use sites like Prolific to get responses from a diverse demographic. It's an easy way for them to get more participants. However, when Frank posted the video, it went viral among the viewers who followed her, and most of the viewers were young women. Soon after that, Prolific saw a large increase in new signups. New participants are always welcome, but unfortunately, they were all from the same demographic category, young women. This limits the scope of their study, and the whole purpose of conducting large-scale randomized studies was jeopardized. Most of the studies relied on responses from a diverse group, and having predominantly young female participants made the research heavily biased. Frank's viewers were just looking to make a quick buck. Instead, they disrupted heaps and heaps of research. Thanks for watching. What's the craziest thing you ever did for money? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time.